show. They should live downstairs.
That's good. I'm glad to see the plants have made an appearance, which is good because we all have plants. Like every good Ding broadcast, we are surrounded by nature. Excellent. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this session on the MA PGDip and MA Creative Teaching and Learning Design. I'm Tony Reeves from Ding, and a huge welcome to my colleague and business partner, Phil Gon.
Hello. Very nice to be here today.
Hello. So thank you for joining us if you're watching this live, and if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording as always. So this session is a quick introduction to our PGDip and MA stage of the Creative Teaching and Learning Design course that we run in conjunction with Bournemouth University. It's a 3-stage course, a PG Cert, PGDip and MA, but it's also possible to join the PGDip and MA stages independently. If you've already got 60 credits of higher education qualifications at level 7 in a relevant discipline, then you can jump onto the PGDip. And the DIP really focuses on professional application of learning design knowledge and skills, building through to an MA, which is a professional research project in creative teaching and learning design. So we thought today it would be good to give a little introduction to the course and our approach to designing it. So here we go. Let me just share the screen. All right, so here we are. Right. So we're very fortunate to be working with Arts University Bournemouth, who are a leading specialist provider of creative education, and they provide a range of master's qualifications in creative disciplines. And the learning design qualification really pulls together a lot of skill sets that you often find within people working in creative disciplines into something in support of creative teaching and learning design. So I will say, if you are watching this live, please do share questions or comments in the chat, and we will do our best to bring them into the session as we go through. And a quick overview of the session. I'm going to say a little bit about why you might want to study for an MA in creative teaching and learning design. Also then why study with Ding? Who are we? What have we got to say about learning design? And then I'll briefly explain who we designed this MA for, because it does have a very clear selection of target audiences. And then I'll talk you through the course philosophy, the scenario that we use to deliver the course, and an insight into the course structure. If you are watching this live, do pop into the chat why you might be interested in studying for this course. It's always interesting to hear why people might be interested in postgraduate study, first of all, but also particularly in creative teaching and learning design. So do pop your suggestions and questions and comments in the chat as we go through. All right, so why study for an MA in creative teaching and learning design? Phil, it's about becoming more employable. We've done a lot of work over the last few years around learning design. It is quite an employable skill set, would you say?
Yes, and we've done a lot of work around. You throw me a bit because I thought you were going to ask me about employability.
But employability, that's fine.
We've done a lot of work around sort of this term employability, and I think one of the experiences Tony and I are having is that, interestingly, with very qualified people who've been perhaps in educational institutions for a long time, who have been managing sort of multi-dimensional tasks, budgeting, teaching, curriculum design, managing framework changes, that in that single sort of job role, employability lives large. And sometimes just sort of talking to people who've been sort of in teaching or teaching adjacent roles, I think sometimes they have lost sight of just how employable they are. So this is not to suggest that masters or this course or this learning experience somehow makes you more employable. I think what it will do is it will help people focus on how and what they've always been doing that makes them so employable and produces their employability across different types of sectors. So it's not like this is an MA or an experience for people who sort of want to leave one sector for another. But what it will do, and what it has done certainly in our conversations with with others, is that you suddenly realise that the landscape of your job role opens up and starts to feel like it has relevancy in lots of different spaces and places. So I think by becoming more employable, it's like you have more Velcro on you. You suddenly realise that your skill sets can stick in different places and perhaps in sort of surprising and unexpected places. I mean, Tony's listed a few there, but I think you could take a moment and unpick your own current job role and realize that in fact you're doing lots of exciting things all the time that perhaps have become invisible to you because they don't feel like they are about, teaching, or they don't feel they're about sort of the coalface of education or whatever it is. But we know through all of our conversations that actually the people are sitting on very powerful sort of nuclear reactors, really, of employability. They perhaps may have forgotten about that, or that the reframe that this course potentially offers has proven very useful to some, I know. So
Yeah, that's a key point, isn't it? That was a big piece of the puzzle when we were putting this together. It was born a lot out of the conversations with often education professionals, like you say, who felt de-skilled and didn't really know what to do with that hugely valuable skill set that actually is very transferable in terms of communication, design, working with stakeholders, managing projects, and it just happens to be through the lens of learning. So it is often about revaluing those skills and helping people see that they have more skills than perhaps they realize, as you say.
but I'll just quickly say before you move on that people who aren't in education, but I don't know anyone who doesn't have like a vested interest in education being better, because think about parents, think about employers, people who sort of like who want people to be educated or want education to work for everybody. So I think that even this is going out to people who aren't in the HE sector, or aren't in teaching, and are thinking, well, it's like it works in the other direction as well. Is that a lot of the work that's taking place, in a non-educational scenario, does not preclude you from adding value in educational spaces in that respect. So that's why, and we'll get to it later, we've been careful to ensure that, while obviously this is a master's degree, and it's in that place, that it shouldn't be seen as like an academic province, something that is sort of precludes people who are interested or adjacent to education but are themselves not in the sector, or wouldn't identify as being sort of in education. Because I think some of the most interesting stuff that's happening now in terms of sort of the skills, how important skills are, and apprenticeships, there's this blend coming through, right, which is to do with the fact these two worlds have got to start talking to each other much more successfully.
Yeah, I think that's key, and another aspect of this is that leadership aspect. And as you say, this is something that's come through a lot in the projects that we've done, the people we've worked with. But often it is about leading through design. As a learning design or a learning professional, often you have to walk into unfamiliar situations and use your design knowledge of people, knowledge of how to structure an experience, a productive experience. Often you are leading in unfamiliar situations, and I think that's often undervalued in learning related roles. So this course is very much about helping you shine a light on those leadership skills, because it's a key part of what it means to be a learning professional.
Yeah, if you're designing learning experiences, you are putting in front of people as sort of a sequence of experiences, a sequence of touch points, and that is leadership. That's like you're stewarding people through experiences. You are often dealing with complexity, and I would say that there's a big relationship between leadership as we understand it here and being able to walk into spaces and to decomplexify them for actual human beings. So how do you make knowledge available? How do you make knowledge land with people? And that's what learning design means practically. It is the ability to take a complex body of knowledge or a complex space and sort of find out ways to give it away most effectively to the benefit of other people.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? Like you say, a key part of learning design is bringing people with you, because if you don't bring people with you, you've had a really ineffective learning experience. And that's where the parallels with effective leadership are really clear. You have to bring people with you on the journey.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're not going to learn anything. Same as if you don't bring people with you, they're not going to do what you want them to do. So, yeah, the leadership aspect is really key. It's an MA, so as you would expect, it's about advanced research. So the DIP is more skills focused, giving you the skills across a range of learning design activities. And the idea is that then builds through into the master's unit, where you choose a topic or an area that you've been interested in over the course of that 60 credits of PGDip, and you engage with that in depth through an advanced research project. So builds you through, gives you the skills to do advanced research. And again, not just academic research, it could be customer research. It's about investigating and producing effective investigations into scenarios and situations. And we do run a journal called the JUICE, the Journal of Useful Investigations in Creative Education. You will have opportunities to publish in there, but equally, preparing research reports, you might want to publish those elsewhere, or use them in the context of your own professional work. So it's not just, as I say, academic research, it's about producing informed projects and outcomes that you can then share with whichever audience you are aiming to influence. So we cover a lot of professional skills in this. So as we said, project management, managing learning design projects, aspects of user experience, and how users or learners experience the things that you're designing and creating. Fairly obviously, a lot about digital technologies and AI, which is obviously having a huge impact on not just the learning sector, but all sectors. We place a particular emphasis on storytelling, which is absolutely key to the work that we do, of a heavy use of narrative and storytelling and scenarios for lots of reasons, which we could do a whole webinar on, but mainly because the use of storytelling is key to helping experiences land with people, whether that's in learning or in business, but also because the role of storytelling and narrative and fiction is a great way to bring people with you on a journey and maintain engagement. So we do help our learners harness storytelling, not just for learning, but also for influencing stakeholders that they're trying to work with. Obviously, creative direction, because we're designing learning experiences, and creative direction plays a key part in designing an effective experience, making sure it's on brand, making sure it looks professional, and that all elements are working in support of the goal. As a part of that, video production and storyboarding, so how to think about why you might produce videos, and how you might go about storyboarding those videos and the role that they play in learning design. And this is all part of what you could call effective communication. So learning design is very much an act of effective communication. If you're not communicating effectively, very often you'll lose your learners very quickly. So communication is key. As I say, analysing and producing research. So a whole range of professional skills. Any others you'd add to that list, Phil?
I just probably just put some caveats around it, because I don't want to sort of scare the horses, which is that when we talk about something like video production or indeed storyboarding, if you were doing a storyboarding degree, that would mean that you were in the art of drawing and sort of film language. In this instance, storyboarding is a kind of a collective word for how you might break apart something complex and build it out and put it together. How do you sequence? So video production as well. We're not talking about taking you out on location with a boom mic and a green screen. We're about essentially that all the research suggests that, and we know with TikTok and YouTube, that video is no longer a special thing. It is a baseline expectation in terms of how we consume knowledge. And so the production of videos, we know that some of the most successful production of videos is someone on their mobile phone doing a piece to camera for TikTok immediately. We're not talking about video production as a rarefied special skill set. It's actually, I would say, it's really about how you look at this thing called video as a kind of a space and how you make it work for your intentions. So again, I don't want to frighten the horses and people think, oh my goodness, I don't have any experience in those things. Try and imagine it as, well, our interest in it is always about sequencing of information to create an effect, an intended effect in the imaginations and of other people. And I would say that storytelling could go right above all of those things. So by storytelling, perhaps what we're really talking about is how do you take people from A to B in a way that serves your intentions, but also never forgets that it's for somebody else. So a good story can be about anything and told any which way. It's all about the intention and all about what effect you're trying to produce in the imagination of somebody else. So
yeah, it's a great way of framing it, really, because sequencing, I've said before, is I think one of the most important aspects of learning design, because it is about how you present information and experiences and in what order and why that's suitable for this audience, not that audience. And like you say, what video may have a big role in that, it may have a tiny role in that, but it's really about sequencing information effectively to produce the intended outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, we're making video now, right? I mean, to be honest, we're making video now, and this is in the context of a recorded Zoom call. But as we know very well, that a recorded Zoom call that lasts for an hour may not be the best way to produce the effect and engagement in a learner. So literally learning how to subdivide content, growing an instinct to chapterize a video, to know when that's a nugget of knowledge and that's a nugget of knowledge, and knowing when to kind of call time on something. all of that I would put in the basket of video production,
Yeah.
because as a video producer myself, what I'm really doing, there might be some technology, right, and there might be some sort of like bells and whistles, but none of that matters um, unless you are aware of why you're calling time on a particular piece of information, and when and why and for what purpose. It's the courage to stand up to duration, I think, is really a key part of the learning design skill set. It's understanding those things.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, and using duration as a tool and using it absolutely with intention, so it's not too short, too long, and what are the touch points throughout that experience.
Yeah, that's user experience, right? That's it.
Yes.
That's. I mean, we could again go one above the ladder, couldn't we, and say that what we're really talking about is user experience, and what we're really talking about at the top of that ladder is a learning experience that works. It's the right knowledge, the right way to produce the right effect, and you can cut that any which way. But absolutely, when you study with us, you will always be having those conversations about the right knowledge the right way, and that can mean different things in different contexts, for different customers, for different learners, but the conversation with yourself should always be that.
Yeah, and that leads us nicely onto why I study with Ding. And as you say, we've done this a lot in the last few years, in all sorts of contexts: professional, corporate, apprenticeships, higher education, internationally. So all of this knowledge that we brought into this, the PGDip and the MA, is born out of our experience of working with customers and doing this, and like you say, and professional experience of sequencing and video editing and producing learning experiences, both being course leaders, all of this. So we do have a fairly extensive amount of experience around this. We've got a team of professionals that we work with for teaching, and also on the consultancy project learning design work that we do. And so Ben leads our PG Cert. Rosie, Tara, and Joel work with us in learning design roles on projects and also on delivery. Ray and Nicholas, they are a lot of the institutional knowledge of Ding. I've worked with Ray and Nicholas for a long time, and they have a huge amount of experience in learning and teaching in creative disciplines. And obviously, Phil and myself, we do this every day, and we've learned a lot through doing it, and we're very excited to be able to teach people about it. So broadly, we've got a lot of expertise in the team that makes us very well placed to deliver this MA.
I mean, and I just want to say about that one of the sort of original definitions of assessment, which I've learned recently, comes from the term "to sit beside." That idea that the great knowledgeable others, the people that you're studying with, are not in fact in some ivory tower, or that they are sitting beside you. And I just would like to reflect anyone who's listening and who's watching it later that because we are currently saying yes to projects that are indeed outside of our own immediate experience, Tony and I have learned so much in the last 5 years. We've had to be brave, and we've had to be different, and we've had to reframe our skills probably 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 times. We've had to deal with the disruptions of COVID. We've had to deal with the disruptions of AI. We are like living tissue. So our knowledge and our experience is not somehow boxed off and finished. We are literally sitting beside learners. So on this course, we are not a long way off from you. We are sitting beside you, because chances are that when we stop delivering and teaching, we're off saying yes to a project that scares us a little bit, or we're off working with a client in a sector that perhaps 5 years ago we could not have predicted for ourselves. And I'm just putting that out there as a strength, and as a sort of a founding first principle of the way we like to talk about teaching and how we like to express our own experience, which is that we are sitting beside you in that way, because what we've learned, the thing we've learned and we're talking about, maybe for us that's still fresh as well. Okay, so this is not a dusty expression of the corridors of knowledge around learning design. It is something a little bit more frontline than that, right, Tony? Would you say?
I'd say it feels pretty frontline most of the time. Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do the course in a way, which was to sort of respond to the realities of the ways in which that learning meets the world and meets other people's understanding of its value, because it is not understood, and it is a discussion, and it is an interesting and disruptive and volatile space right now. It is unfixed and unfixing right now. So
Yeah, and we are absolutely right in the middle of that. And credit to Arts University Bournemouth, because that currency was really the reason behind the partnership with Arts University Bournemouth. The fact that we are doing this, we're not just teaching it, we are doing it every day, and we're bringing all of that insight into the course. You couldn't be closer in closer proximity to people actually enacting this and figuring out what's happening on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, that's a key part of what we're doing.
that's why we look so tired all the time as well.
That's also true. A couple of quick examples. So Iosphere, we're still working with this team. They're a great team. They're a startup. They've grown significantly since we started working with them, and we built a fictional scenario with them. We built a whole fictional organization data set, and their rationale was very much about closing the skills gap for data analysts. So that was one example of a project that we did involving all sorts of learning design, right from a 4-page brief right through to a fully built out 10-week course. Eon, we did some work with them. Similar scenario based, but in a completely different context, taking smart meter engineers and helping them go through a learning experience to become more effective at what they were doing, but bringing in scenario based learning and professional skills into that. So two quite different examples, but examples of how we take what we do and use it in a whole variety of contexts with different clients. But again, just sort of a couple of examples there of how we work with clients, but use our knowledge of learning and all the things that we've learned through learning and teaching and bring that into different spaces. And that's really just to say, we use this metaphor, we're not a holiday resort. I think often, and I know you've had this experience, you've worked on MAs or worked with people running MAs, and they're great, but they are often a bit removed from practice. And so what we are always trying to do is close this gap between theory and practice by being as current as we are, and bringing all that sort of real knowledge, up-to-date knowledge into the course.
Yeah, and I'd say to that, I think that education, the idea that you go and study a subject and it is just a world away from conversations around employability. I think there's nothing wrong at all with education existing for education's. I've got no problem with education being a resort. I think the problem when it comes to theories of learning and education is that it really has no business being a resort, because you're talking about ideas that are meant to produce change in real people, in real environments. And so in that respect, we were very keen from the outset to remain honest. And that's not to say that other courses are dishonest. What I mean by that simply is that if you can remember what it's like to build a beautiful thing and discover that the client or the other person, the recipient of that beautiful thing, didn't want it in the first place, that you built it in the image of the theory, or you built it in the image of your own interests or your own research or whatever it is, and then you present that and you try and take it out into the world, it can be very dispiriting when the world looks at you as if you've lost your mind, or as if you've brought your holiday photos back and you're saying, hey, isn't this amazing? It's like, well, I wasn't there. How does this help me? And that idea that learning and sort of managing knowledge is about change and producing an effect for people. That's so key. But that's the beginning of it. That's just the start of it, because it's like, how do you do that? And how do you manage multiple perspectives on the same issue? How do you make people care? How do you stand up to a boring paradigm in an existing business? How do you lead? How do you do all of those things? I think that if you don't leave the resort, and you don't test and you don't meet your ideas with sort of like the textures of the real world, then you've had a nice time, but maybe you haven't moved the needle. So we want the course to feel like that it's a resort for you. You can do amazing things, but we will always remind you that it's in connection with an actual place and actual people. And what does that mean? What does that mean for your idea? What's the consequences of that?
Yeah, absolutely that. And just that idea of not existing in silos is so important. And certainly I've had that experience in working in higher education, where great courses, but even though they're striving to model employability or prepare students for employability, there is still that disconnect, and it's a hard thing to get right. But yeah, we're very much about closing that gap between theory and practice. So who's the MA for? 3 distinct groups. Firstly, higher education professionals. So it is about, as we've said, revaluing your skills, the skills that HE professionals have, taking theory into practical solutions, but also learning how to navigate the world of higher education if that's where you're going and you want to go. It's about designing learning for diversity, for making sure that whatever learning experience you're designing, that it will land with the intended audience. And it's very much about the strategic aspect of learning design. So instead, connecting it to educational strategies and policies. So figuring out where your organization is going and how learning design can help deliver the strategy of that organization. So it's very much about equipping HE professionals with knowledge and the skills required to lead through learning.
I just want to say quickly, I know you want to move on, but while that last line, connect learning design to educational strategies and policies. For some of you, I don't know, if you're a policy wonk, that might be like, ooh. For others, it'd be like, yikes. I would say this, and I would say this to Tony as well, that it's about how to be a powerful leader, how to be powerful, how to be influential, how to exert influence, how to make change, how to make something happen. The only way you can do that is to be clear about how your interests in learning align with educational strategy and policy, and that is coming from 2 people who have been in the trenches and have exerted every muscle in their bodies around trying to make change or do something. And the resistance sometimes that you meet isn't personal, it's not conspiratorial. It is simply about the fact that you do not understand the metrics that are driving your institution's behaviors. And once you do, and once you start to align and start to think about your stakeholders and start to imagine your stakeholders, you can start to be more powerful and more impactful, as opposed to just being very frustrated and being thwarted and wondering if the institution that you're working for is interested in education at all. And that's me speaking as honestly as I can about why it's so important to connect learning design to everything else.
Yeah, and I think that absolutely connects with the second group. So for business professionals, just replace the word education with learning. If you're working in an L&D department, it's absolutely about the same things. It's about delivering value for the business. Most businesses will have an L&D department if they're of a certain size, but often L&D is in the same situation as higher education courses in terms of having to demonstrate value. Why are we spending this money on this learning program? What metrics is it satisfying? Is it satisfying metrics? Well, how is it delivering the strategy? So for business professionals, learning design has the same purpose, if you like, as it does in higher education. It is about delivering value for the business and making sure that the time spent learning, in inverted commas, is not time wasted, that it is equipping people with knowledge and skills to deliver the strategy. It is about things like stakeholder management. It's about meeting objectives, and it's about value. And those things increasingly are, I think that language is increasingly used in higher education. Maybe 5-10 years ago, there was a bigger gap between higher education and business. But I think now, given the financial pressures that higher education is under, it is very much about return on investment, strategic alignment, value, communicating objectives and meeting objectives. So yeah, this is why learning design, it's very easy for someone doing learning design in an educational context to just step over into a business context, because broadly you're doing the same job.
And also, I mean, we know that a lot of sort of business and sort of learning development is to do with compliance, and compliance is a word that immediately feels like it has nothing to do with learning experiences, and often they are very separate, because compliance training can be deathly dull. And so one of the things that we haven't talked about either on the last slide or this one is the fact that you have the opportunity to ensure that the learning experience is not deathly dull. I mean, you would have thought, wouldn't you, that the acquisition of knowledge can't be deathly dull, because you're learning new things. But we all know that for many people, the idea they have to do something new, learn something else, doesn't produce excitement. It produces a groan. It's like, what now? I'm full up. I don't want to learn anything. I just want to do my job. And that's part of our interest with this course and with the discussions we will have on it, which is trying to understand and trying to contextualize ideas and learning in the actual realities of what people think about learning, which is that resistance and challenge are go with the territory. They go hand in hand with learners. And what can you do to ensure that you're meeting the needs of the business? But also, let's not forget, you're moving actual human beings through an experience. How can that be better? How can that be interesting? What does productive challenge look like in that space?
Yeah, and that's interesting because that's also why the course is aimed at this third group of professionals, creative professionals. Because if you are a creative professional, you're often doing a lot of those things that you just mentioned, Phil. You are responding to customer needs or solving problems or using design to open up new ideas and experiences for customers or clients. So the course is also intended for creative professionals who want to develop their skills in things like design thinking, but also connecting a design process with an audience, creating resources, assets to engage people. That might be learners, but it might be customers, it might be stakeholders. But it's for creative professionals, often you have that skill set as well in terms of you're used to dealing with complex, unstructured problems and being sort of results orientated, or making sure that what you design actually works for people. So learning design, again, speaks very, very strongly to that space, I would say. So a little bit about the course philosophy. I mean, we've in that last section there, we've given a little bit of an insight into the course philosophy, but there are some key principles that underpin what we do on the course, just as there are in the professional work that we do for clients. So it's a large part of this is a focus on doing. When I ran a PG cert, the first thing that I said to people was, people come into education thinking it's about teaching, and often it's about learning through doing. Good education or effective learning often starts with doing. So all of our learning experiences begin with you doing something, and we do that through a range of techniques, but particularly through scenarios, teamwork and challenges and activities to help you take abstract knowledge and focus it on a problem. So this focus on doing is absolutely key, isn't it, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, we all remember that situation where we are excited perhaps about new knowledge, and we come in and we sit down and that new knowledge is presented to us on slides or presented to us in a particular way, and by the end of the session we can't remember why we were excited about it in the first place, because there's a postponement dimension to teaching. In a sense, you go in and you receive some information, and the thing that you wanted the information for is kind of over there, or it's next week, or it's the week after, or the knowledge only becomes vital or an active agent when you meet a problem, should you be lucky enough to meet a problem for which that knowledge is useful. If you don't meet that problem soon enough, you've probably forgotten what you were told. So this idea of focus on doing is, it could also be described as problem-led learning, in that so much. In other words, that it's like, okay, this knowledge that you have, it's like it's an active agent. It's going to happen to something, and it's going to happen to that something today. And it might be that you don't fully understand all the theory, you haven't entirely internalized it, but I'll tell you what, you will probably internalize it much more quickly when it proves its relevance by solving a problem on day one, as opposed to solving a problem in some hazy utopian future when you might use it one day.
Yeah.
So the focus on doing is again, just, it aligns with that sit beside idea that the time is now, and we're going to sort of you're going to sort of experience the acquisition of knowledge and internalizing probably at the same pace and speed that we have had to do that, because that is kind of the workplace. That's one of the truths that we're keen to keep in the course, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key to the work that we do. We organise the course around 6 pillars, and other pillars are available, but we've chosen these 6. But this is born out of a lot of thinking and discussions and our professional work into key aspects of learning design. So empathy, curriculum, inclusivity, facilitation, technology, and community. So for us, those are the 6 core elements of a learning experience, and our course is mapped to those. So you cycle through these during the weeks and months on the course, and the idea is that you build up your skills and knowledge incrementally in those areas as we go through them in spirals. And in doing that, you develop the ability to produce great learning experiences, because for us and through our experience, great learning experiences come out of a combination of these 6 factors.
Well, I mean, it's it's based on the color wheel, as you can see. So you have your three major colors from which other colors are generated. So curriculum, empathy, and technology are sort of like the three big ones. And then and let's just for a second, we won't spend very long on it, but if you just do the maths with me, which is that if you are thinking about your curriculum, so the content that your learners are going to get from you, unless you're applying empathy to that, you're not going to be thinking about how is that curriculum going to be tools to be at its most impactful. And that's an inclusivity conversation, that when you sort of look at curriculum delivery through an empathic lens, you immediately are drawn to inclusive practices. And the reason for that is simple. You're not drawn to those inclusive practices because you've got a policy. You're not drawn to those inclusive practices because that's what you think you should be doing. You're drawn to inclusive practices because you want your curriculum to actually land and practically affect the people who are receiving that curriculum. So if you're not thinking around inclusive practices, you're not thinking about generating impactful, transformative learning experiences. So that's how we sort of rotate through these pillars, that they give rise to each other, and they give rise to each other. That if you put these things together, these ideas together, you're drawn to having to. Another example: curriculum and technology. Technology, there's so much of it, right? There's millions of tools. We're using Zoom now, whatever. But if you because technology is so extraordinary, the effect it can have on curriculum means that the days of kind of like being in a lecture theatre for 70 minutes and listening to one person read from a book are way gone. That doesn't work. It worked then for all sorts of reasons because there was no tech. But when you add tech to curriculum, you suddenly absolutely make the argument for a more facilitated experience, because suddenly you can have interactive slides. Suddenly you can sort of put people in breakout rooms. The relationship between curriculum and technology, when you really start thinking about the interaction of those two spaces, a more facilitatory experience becomes the logical outcome of those things. So that's what we will cycle through those reactions really, to help you be as sensitized to that as certainly we've become in this last 5 years.
Yeah, and again, this is all born out of our experience, and the final one, the empathy and technology. This was hugely borne out through COVID, but particularly even before that. I mean, a lot of the work that you did, Phil, on when you were course leader for your undergrad course, that ability to use technology empathically produces community. If you
Yeah.
can get people using a tool, but not just focused on the tool, you can use it to develop hugely powerful communities that can absolutely transform a learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely right. So that was where, just to say that in terms of the six colors, the six colors are not decorative, and they are not an expression that's tidy. They're an expression of transformational effects of ideas, one upon the other. So they're the effect of lenses combining, and we've had to combine those lenses because of the origin story of Ding, which is that you were born out of COVID, born out of this move to go online, and people went online to discover that everything was actually a bit worse, and yet and people were blaming the onlineness of that learning is bad because it's online. Actually, a more truthful conclusion would be that when learning remains the same and then moves genre or is reframed, that's when there's an issue. And so the opportunities that we've had to sort of really consider and look in a practical way about what is important in a learning experience, and how does it sort of how can you kind of cook a brilliant experience up. And this is our best attempt at explaining the interrelationship of some big ideas, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And then combined with that is this idea of little and often. So we've used this a lot in our courses, and we absolutely believe that this is a key to moving people quickly. It's why our course is structured the way it is. It's a tried and tested approach. The idea is that each week you complete short tasks that enable you to apply what you've learned, rather than postponing doing to the end of the module or a final project. the idea is that you work iteratively, because everyone on this course is going to be some kind of professional, or have, even if they're not in a professional role at the moment, they will have demands from family and other demands. So the idea of little and often is that when you have time in a week, you can do something useful, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to do that thing and write a massive piece of work in 16 weeks. So little and often, iterative working is the key to, firstly, internalizing information effectively, and also to moving people quickly. So, and it also means that we can see what you're doing. So as you produce work over the course of a module, of a unit, we can give you feedback on it. And therefore, that's how you move more quickly, because we can see what you're doing, we can see if you're struggling, and we can give you targeted feedback. So it just produces a lot richer learning experience. And then the other key thing that we use is scenario-based learning, and again, this is born out of our experience working with professional companies. But increasingly, we are bringing scenario-based learning into pretty much everything that we do, because there are lots of powerful devices in scenario-based learning that produce effective and engaging learning experiences. Particularly for us, it's about helping people solve problems. A lot of education, higher education, again, in my limited experience, but based on a lot of investigation, can be quite detached from the real world, in inverted commas, because it tries to be everything to everyone. It's about helping prepare learners for every possible situation. And actually, when you use a scenario, it completely condenses that and prevents you having to use a best practice approach and saying, generally, this is great for in most situations. And actually, it's about what's happening in this situation. So scenarios make learning much more immediate and make it much easier to see what needs to be done in a particular problem, which you can then extrapolate out into other contexts. But it stops you getting lost in this sort of very abstract world of best practice, and helps you really focus on solving immediate problems practically using skills. And also, we found that it's a better because of that. It helps prepare people better for professional environments, which are unstructured, moving very quickly, uncertain, incomplete information. So scenarios are a great way to model that uncertainty and that lack of a perfect environment, and help people prepare for the realities of the work that they want to do beyond the course. The other key concept is Rubin's vase, and we use this a lot because, as you can see there, if you look at the vase, there are two ways of looking at this. You may see the faces, you may see the vase. Some people see the vase first, some people see the faces. We found this to be a very useful way of articulating the hidden factors that produce effective learning experiences. Often people design for what they know, which is the curriculum, and you see this a lot in apprenticeship standards or in learning outcomes. People build courses and learning experiences based on the things that they know are needed, and that's great. But often what that leaves out is all the hidden factors that produce success when that knowledge is enacted in a professional environment. And they might be often referred to as transferable skills or professional skills, and the ability to negotiate uncertainty or manage stakeholders or work with incomplete information. So all of those factors are the invisible matter that helps manifest the curriculum, but they're often not designed for. And increasingly, when we're designing any learning experience, not just our one, but working with corporate clients, one of the first things we do is this hidden curriculum exercise to figure out what's really important in that experience. And so, go on, Phil.
No, I was just going to say that we do this a lot, this maneuver, but it's because and it comes from a place of frustration, because we anecdotally and we've because we work with so many different clients now, that there's always this second ask. There's always an ask, and it's like, oh, okay. So then there we okay, we need them to do this, and this, and this, and this, and then there's like a but, and then there's this huge long run-on sentence about all the other things that people are expected to be able to do. And if I honestly had £1 or £5 for every time we spent more time in a scoping conversation, talking about all this stuff and discovering that we were vying over a vocabulary for the stuff. We've kind of like, we've done it enough now. This is not our first rodeo, and we've sort of decided that we're moving this right up to the front of the discussion, because the other stuff about the curriculum, like, oh, I want to learn photography, or I want to learn health and safety. It's like, fine. I expect you could probably use an AI now to give you all of that exactly. You could find all of that wherever. The bit that's really hard, the bit where value lives, the bit where a sort of a learning designer really starts to feel, I think, their leadership and their muscularity is how can you start to actually structurally deal with the skills that are that enact knowledge and that make knowledge useful for other people. How do you do that? And if you're not doing that, what are you doing? Because it's the thing most requested. So we've just decided, we've walked into that space.
Yeah.
Just said that it's really important to start with those discussions, because otherwise they're an afterthought. But the paradox is they're the afterthought that takes up the most time and space, and seems to have the biggest impact on people's ability to change and transform, and to sort of to feel less anxious about the unpredictabilities of the workplace and of life in general, right? So yeah, it feels like it's an important job that we have to do better.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, that hidden factor is just such a key aspect in all the work that we do now, isn't it? Is figuring out what's not being asked for, and why is it important. Okay, just very quickly, a week on the course. So if you're wondering how the course is delivered, it's a 2-hour talk session at a point in the week. I've said TBC there because often what we do is at the start of the course is figure out when the least inconvenient time for people is to schedule that 2-hour session. Often it's on a Wednesday morning, but right at the start we figure out where people are in terms of time zones, and we work out what the optimal time is for that 2-hour talk session. So it's a 2-hour talk session a week, a 1-hour group session on a Thursday evening, and then about 5 hours a week of self-directed work where you work through activities to, this is the little and often approach. So each week you work through a series of activities that helps us see what you're doing and give you feedback on your work. And then tutors are available for support during office hours. But that's that idea of a little and often approach. It's a talk session, a group session, and some self-directed work. And then we repeat that over the course of the week. This is just a quote. We spoke to a client recently, and this was about AI. And if you're wondering why this course is useful right now, this was just to do with the fact that learning designers, she said, my learning designers are all using AI and they're just producing the same stuff more quickly. And so a lot of what we're trying to do here with what we're doing is helping people think more intentionally about the way in which they approach learning. And this underpins all of the way in which we approach technology on the course. And we use AI obviously all the time now in terms of what we're doing, but this is really helping people think how to use these tools more effectively, so that you're not just producing very standardized experiences, which I think is going to be increasingly an issue as AI is used in learning design. So I want to say a little bit about the scenario. So in this particular the module, in this stage of the PGDip is 60 credits. So 40 credit unit called Learning Design Toolkit and a 20 credit unit called Researching Creative Teaching and Learning Design. This first 40 credits is all delivered in scenario. And this scenario is a fictional university called Westbridge University. And so we've built this as a way to model and help learners learn all of these complex skills around stakeholders, business priorities, what's really important, who's asking for what, and we just happen to frame that in a fictional university. The idea is that the university is at an important point in its evolution. It's struggling with student satisfaction. It's got an ambitious plan, and you join as a learning designer in this innovation, in the innovation hub that's been created to tackle some of these problems. And this innovation hub is made up of some people working from a higher education context, but it's also actively sought people from outside of higher education to bring their skills in to solve this. And Westbridge University excels in ambition, which I think is lovely. The hub itself, as you join, so that the hub has these 5 initiatives. It's about developing a digital learning framework for the university, the learning experience model, redesigning assessment, integrating AI, and looking at flexible learning pathways. And these are 5 really common examples of what clients are often dealing with. They're often dealing with some kind of approach to digital strategy, some kind of bespoke experience model. Like what does learning experience mean in the context of that particular business? How are they assessing their learners? How are they using AI? And how are they providing flexibility? So regardless of the professional context you're working within, these are very common challenges. And these are why we've chosen these to frame the scenario. It's more than a case study. So all the activities you'll experience on this are delivered through authentic documents. So when you are asked to do something, it won't just be do this. It'll come from somewhere in the scenario. A stakeholder will ask for something, or it'll be an email or a project. You will have competing agendas. So you'll have to figure out who's asking for what and why is that important, and why does that matter, and what does that mean for the rest of the business. We've drawn in some organizational politics and constraints, so it's very much not a best practice approach. There are real constraints that you've got to work within, and the idea here is that these constraints make this a realistic vehicle for applying learning design. So you're not designing learning for an idealistic scenario. There are some real constraints that you've got to work within, and these are all very much designed to model the constraints that you'll be working with either in your own businesses or in the business or the organization that you hope to go into. And because of that, it's full of real world challenges. So as learning designers, and Phil, we have to navigate these things all the time, don't we? So what's the budget? What are the leadership dynamics around here? Who are we designing for? How does that affect the project? Who are the key stakeholders in this project? Who might be resistant? Who might be an advocate? What's the technology? What can we use? What can't we use? What does the organization have? What is forbidden? How might we make this learning experience accessible, but how do we negotiate the limitations placed on us? And how do we make sure that everyone can access this experience? So these are all, again, key considerations in any learning design project. So we've pulled all those through into the scenario, and you'll be navigating these as you undertake your work for Westbridge. And this is an example of what we said earlier, going beyond the resort. So the idea is that traditional learning can often be a bit of a resort. It's like ideally we could do anything, but actually in scenario, you are very limited in in your choices sometimes, or the scenario controls the choices that you can make, and you have to really think clearly about why you're designing something versus something else, and who you're designing it for, and whether it's going to work for this group of people in this particular scenario. And again, this really reflects the idea that real world learning design is about solving complex problems, often within quite tight constraints, both budgetary and in terms of politics and organizational structure. And we try to bridge this through scenarios so that you are able, when you go out into your wherever you're working, wherever you're applying this, you're able to navigate these tensions in your own business and in your own work.
Yeah, I mean, in lots of ways, when we talk about scenario-based learning, it takes longer to talk about than it does to experience. It's a bit like when you watch a film. You watch the film. When someone tells you about the film, it can take them a quarter of an hour, and you're thinking, well, So very simply, I would say that whereas perhaps in another type of learning context, you might get a project brief, and the project brief is just like do an abstract thing for this reason and blah blah blah. Your project briefs in this instance will take the form of potentially, I don't know, I'm winging it here, but let's imagine that your project takes the form of an email from the Vice Chancellor, who is very clearly asking for clarity on an issue. And as a learning designer in this institution, you have to go off and you have to work with 4 or 5 fictional stakeholders to understand and to bring that information back in such a way that would satisfy that stakeholder. So it's just a project brief. It's a thought experiment. It is something that will drive knowledge and enact the knowledge that you've sort of been encountering during the course. But what you'll also be encountering is how it feels to know something in a space that maybe isn't sympathetic to you, doesn't share your immediate interests, or you have to bring people with you. So in that respect, it's a project brief plus, and the plus is born from our absolute conviction that if you're not working the muscles around those hidden curriculum spaces, if you're not sort of, I guess, drawing on the real world, then perhaps that project hasn't prepared you or worked all of the muscles that you're actually going to need to be an effective learning designer sort of externally. So it is project briefs plus is what you're going to experience, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And another key aspect of this is the assessment, so authentic assessment. So the idea is that through this, you're producing professional artifacts, not abstract essays. Right from day one of the course, you're producing scoping reports, you're designing documents, project plans, ways to sequence information, communications presentations, and this is all, as you can imagine, what you have to do as a learning designer. You're having to produce whatever you need to produce to sequence that effective learning experience, to show why this learning experience is relevant in this particular context. So the assessment is very much born out of you producing professional artifacts rather than an abstract representation of that knowledge. So the DIP really focuses on this. As you go through into the MA, you then come back to a topic that you found interesting, and then you can look at producing some form of journal article or a report or a research output for an audience. Again, the idea is that we're focusing on a professional artifact, whether that's a journal article or a research report, whatever it happens to be. But the idea is that it's something useful to you as you go beyond the course. So that's the approach to the assessment on the course. And just a little bit about the course structure. So this is the full structure of the MA, the PG Cert, the DIP, and the MA. The PG Cert is focused on core skills and knowledge about teaching and supporting learning, and it covers 6 key areas of learning design that we've mentioned, and it's focusing on how you design and deliver effective learning experiences. So that's the cert. The DIP, as we've said, is more about bringing this through into professional application, both applying learning design both in higher education and corporate contexts. We've mentioned some of the things that you'll be looking at: creative direction, storytelling, collaborating with subject matter experts, and particularly this idea of the learning designer as a consultant, which is it's key. Whether you're external to an organization or within, the learning designer is often a key role in asking questions to help people resolve issues or move projects forward. And it's 2 units: the toolkit, learning design toolkit, 40 credits over 16 weeks, and then moving into the creative teaching and learning design and context, 20 credits over 8 weeks. And then the final unit, the Masters, is a 60 credit research project. This is about developing mastery of teaching and learning design, about choosing a subject that you're interested in and researching it in depth. And through that, we support you to develop a research topic and a question, work out an audience for your research, who are you aiming this at, then how to plan and manage a research project, collect your data and analyze it, and then communicate your research findings in a format that's appropriate to your audience. So that's where the course ends up in the final unit. Okay, and that's 60 credits over 24 weeks. Ultimately, it's all about your journey. So we've designed the DIP and the MA for multiple people, but really it could be that you're coming into higher education and out of a different context, and you want to develop your skills in designing learning for higher education contexts. But equally, it could be that you already have 60 credits and you're interested in, as we said, reskilling, reframing your skills to go and look at learning, how you might apply learning design skills in a whole range of other contexts. And I think that's, for me, some of the most exciting moments is when people realize that they've got a lot more skills than they realized, and that actually they can go and apply those skills in a whole range of different sectors to help people have effective experiences.
Yeah, I would say that the course is conceived really to meet that idea that we know there are a lot of people out there who have been doing something a lot like learning design for a long time. If you like, they've been touching all the bases, working all those muscles, but have never once reframed that as that or seen their powerfulness. And so we know that a lot of people maybe are leaving sectors that have been their home for a long time, and perhaps worrying or wondering about their value, or sort of in that sense. And I think that this course is certainly one way to restore that sense of perhaps self-esteem and to be returned to some core abilities that you already have, but perhaps need to be retooled for more uncertain and more unpredictable futures, really.
Yeah, and I will say that that's born out of lived experience for both of us, because we've both gone on that journey ourselves, both from leaving the higher education sector and then working out how to use the skills that we've developed over sort of 10, 15 years and how to deploy them in different contexts. So that's very much been our journey. Cost for the course, the DIP is £3,500 and the MA is £3,500. Both are part-time because it's designed to work alongside your professional responsibilities, and obviously most people on the course will have some kind of professional responsibility. Also, people are navigating friends and family. So the course it's a part-time only route at £3,500 per stage, and that also goes for the PG Cert as well. Okay, so what are you waiting for? I always have to finish with that. So if you would like to apply, easiest way is to go to the Ding website, ding.global, and you'll see the link there to the course page, and on there you can see student testimonials and videos and insights into the course. And on that page, you can also choose which route you'd like to apply for. So those links there will take you through to the Arts University Bournemouth website. You can submit an application. We speak to absolutely everyone who applies for the course, so we're always very happy to talk with people to find out your interest in the course, whether the course is the right stage for you in your ongoing professional development. So please do book a time to chat with us. Always very happy to have a coffee and a chat and see where you're going, what your professional experience is to this point, and where you might want to take that in the future. So go to ding.global and just either book a call or find the buttons there to apply for the course. So key takeaways: learning design is really a discrete skill. We think that you can learn it alongside other specialisms, because it is about sequencing information and how people experience things, how you design effective experiences. Our course is about learning through situated challenges and active learning through doing. And really, I'd say that specialist knowledge in learning is actually a huge advantage across sectors right now, partly because of what's happening with AI, but partly because of the disruption over the last few years. Learning has never been more in demand, even though often people aren't quite sure that it's the thing that they need. But often skills in learning design, learning communication, and being able to design and deliver experiences for people has never been more in demand. So I think learning design is certainly a good choice of.
And I would just say that leadership in learning has never been more in demand, because AI AI can produce, but it cannot lead. And I would actually say that sort of an understanding around intentionality, transformation, those sort of irreducibly human things, that they're leadership qualities, and it's never been more important, even though it may not be referred to that, and no one may be asking you for that. Leadership is the gap that needs to be filled, and it needs to be filled with confidence and with a good deal of empathy, and real world knowledge of what people are good at asking for and what they're not.
So if you'd like more nourishing morsels from Ding, we do have a fairly prolific output of content on our site. Do come along to ding.global. You can sign up for our newsletter or have a look at some of our previous conversations and videos, blog posts on there, where we unpack all sorts of aspects and perspectives on teaching and learning design. And anything else you'd like to talk about, do drop us an email at hello@ding.global or book a call with us. We are always happy for a chat. Phil, thank you very much. If you're watching this if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching the recording. If you're joining us live, thank you for joining us live. And we hope to see you on the course. I should have said the next cohort starts in September 2025 for the DIP and also for the PG Cert. So if you're interested, then do come along. We've got a couple of months yet to apply, and we will help you make a good decision. So thank you for watching. Thanks, Phil, for joining me today. And we hope to see you at a webinar or on our course very soon.